Hi everyone, and welcome to our Facebook Live session. Apologies for the delay. We have been experiencing some technical difficulties with the browser speaking to the Facebook app. So we are trying something a little bit different. We are using not an external microphone, so I am going to project and hope that the sound is okay on your end. We do have some important admissions cycle updates we want to share with you today. So hopefully we'll have a chance to go through some of our common questions, and then we'll have some time at the end to get questions from the audience as well. So thanks again for joining us. My name is Jessie Metcalf, and I am the Associate Registrar of Enrollment Management for the MD program. And with me today, we have...
My name is Alicia Gignoni. I'm the Enrollment Coordinator for the MD program.
I'm Leslie Taylor. I'm the Admissions Officer for the MD program.
Great. So we're really happy to have Alicia and Leslie, our admissions experts, here with us today to share some advice and some updates on the program. So we are going to start off by going through a list of our common questions, and then we'll move into opening it up more broadly to any questions from applicants and prospective students. So the first question we've been receiving quite a bit is really just around where we're at in the admissions cycle. So we're wondering, we were getting students asking for an update. What's happening in our office, and is there anything that they need to know to prepare over the next couple of months?
So you will be getting an email shortly with next steps in the admissions process. There are two things that applicants should be aware of that are happening right now. The first thing is verification checks. So we'll be conducting random verification checks of the verifiers that you've listed on your application. If you are worried about us being able to reach out to them, we will definitely contact you if we're having any trouble reaching out to them or we need any assistance. The other piece is for Turnitin. We will be checking your brief personal essays through Turnitin for plagiarism. And if you'd like to opt out of having your essay submitted through Turnitin, you can send us an email to md.applicants@utoronto.ca, and we will honor that request, and it won't have any negative effects on your application.
Okay, great. Thanks, Alicia. So another common question we are getting is a question around document submission. So the question is, I have submitted my documents and materials, for instance, my academic CV as part of my MD PhD application, prior to the OMSAS deadline. But I see that on OMSAS, it was uploaded after the deadline had passed. And will this affect my application?
The answer to that is no. It won't have any negative effect on your application. We get a report from OMSAS with all the documents that were received prior to the deadline, regardless of when OMSAS uploads them. They are very busy. They get a lot of documentation. It does take them a while, but we know who sent in their documentation before the deadline, and your application will go forward.
Great. So another common question we're getting is around prerequisites. So as part of our application, we require that applicants list the 3 prerequisite course requirements that we have, including the 2 full course equivalents for life science and the 1 full course equivalent for humanities, social science, or a language. Now, applicants are asking, what if I made a mistake in how I listed my prerequisite, or I omitted one of the prerequisites on the OMSAS section of the application? Does that mean my application won't go forward?
No, your application will not be disqualified if there's a problem with your prerequisites. If you listed an unacceptable course or you missed listing all the prerequisites, the admissions team will check your transcript for other acceptable prerequisite courses. If we find enough prerequisite courses, your application will go forward.
Great. So another very common question at the moment is around GPA. So we do get a lot of questions around how U of T calculates GPA, And OMSAS has provided a GPA calculation for applicants, which they could actually see as part of their OMSAS application now. So the question we're receiving is, OMSAS released my GPA. Will this be the same GPA that U of T uses for admissions?
The answer is no. The OMSAS GPA differs slightly from the University of Toronto GPA. The U of T GPA that we use, the CGPA, will exclude marks from part-time courses and spring and summer courses. And we don't release the U of T CGPA or weighted GPA to the applicant.
Great. So this is a question related to graduate applicants. So if you're applying as a current graduate applicant, that means you've been part of a master's or PhD program, we do require a graduate verifier to be listed on your OMSAS application. And this was a new requirement this year, so we are receiving a number of questions about that. So the question that has come in to us is, I am a graduate applicant, but I did not receive the notification for the graduate degree verification. In other words, my graduate verifier was not contacted. Should I be concerned?
So verifications may be requested by the admissions committee just as part of the evaluation process. So it's not that every single applicant may be contacted. So if you haven't been contacted, there's no reason for concern.
Okay, so moving on to the next set of common questions we're receiving, they tend to be around interview. So the question that we're getting from applicants now is really just around when will interviews be held this year for the University of Toronto?
So interviews for this year for the MD program will be held on February 8th and 29th, as well as March 1st, 8th, 28th, and 29th. For the MD PhD program office, they'll be holding their interviews on February 9th and March 7th.
And as a follow-up to that question, when will applicants hear back about interview invitations? And do top candidates receive invites earlier?
So we expect to be sending out the first invitation emails in mid-January. They go out on a rolling basis as we review the files. So when you get your invitation has nothing to do with your rank or your competitiveness. We extend the invitations usually 2 to 3 weeks prior to the interview day. We use the email that you listed in your OMSAS application. So if that changes, you need to contact OMSAS to change it. And all candidates who are invited must RSVP. If you do not RSVP, someone from our admissions team would call you, so you can't miss your chance for an interview.
Great advice there. So hopefully that calms you a little bit. Of course, I'm sure applicants will be checking emails often, but should you miss it, the admissions team won't let that go by. We will be following up. So will all applicants, including refusals, be contacted?
Yes, so applicants are going to be contacted with refusals starting in January and continuing through to the end of March, and that's alongside the file review process.
Great. And a final question that we have been receiving quite often is around interview scheduling. So if an applicant wants to know if they know they're going to a conference or they're going to be away during one or more of the interview dates, what happens if they receive an interview, and can they reschedule?
So the answer is we make every effort to be flexible and reschedule if there is a conflict. So if you know at this time that you're unavailable for one of our interview days, we invite you to email us at md.applicants@utoronto.ca and let us know the date you're unavailable. And then if you're to be invited for an interview, we won't schedule you on that date. Also, if you do receive an interview and you have a conflict, perhaps you've already accepted an interview at another medical school, email us at that same email address. We will reschedule for you. And we have a lot of flexibility because we have the 6 days in February and March. Just make a point, email us, don't call, because it's so busy. We want to be able to have a paper trail of any changes we're making to the interview schedule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so another great tip there. So I think, we are fortunate in having a number of interview days, so we do try to be as accommodating as possible with the students that are selected for interview. Of course, there may be some exceptions to that rule. If you're invited for the last day of interviews, we might not be able to, make any switches at that time because we'll be ending our interview cycle at the end of March. So I think that's all we wanted to cover in the common questions we've been receiving in our office, but we do want to leave a few minutes for you guys to ask us questions. So if you do have questions, now is your chance. We have 2 admissions experts here ready to take your answers. And while we await to see if any questions come in for us, I will also just note that we do have a couple more Facebook Lives scheduled in January, so we're sort of ramping up our information sharing at this time of year because we're right in the middle of the busy admissions cycle. So in January, we have a session scheduled on January 16th. That's really open to any viewer, but we are going to be talking a little bit about international applications, and if you're planning to apply from outside of Canada, in the US or internationally, we want to share some information there around just timelines and process. There are a few differences. The process itself and the requirements remain the same, but there are a few differences in timelines between the US and Canada, for instance, so we'll be clarifying that with our international admissions officer. And then later in January, we're going to be doing a Facebook Live session which will cover everything around interview prep. So this is always a very hot topic. Once interview invitations begin to go out, I think as they said in mid-January, we'll be letting you know more details around what to expect on interview day, everything from sort of how to dress, how to prepare, tips for practicing for the interview. We'll talk a little bit more about U of T's interview format, which is the MPI, the Modified Personal Interview. And we actually will have some current medical students sharing their advice and tips during that session. So continue to check our website, applymd.utoronto.ca for details on those upcoming sessions. So we did have a question come in around graduate applicants. So for graduate applicants, are we required to complete our degree requirements? And does that include convocating in June? Or does it just mean that you have to write and successfully complete the thesis by June, which is the June 30th is our deadline? So I'll let, maybe Leslie wants to answer that.
Sure. The answer is we expect that all degree requirements be complete by June, including a defense if that's applicable to your program. The convocation generally happens later. We're not as concerned with when you convocate, but we do want all your requirements complete by June 30th.
Great. So another question has come in. So the question is around how grades from 5th year would be considered as part of the application. So it doesn't clarify around whether or not these grades the 5th year is occurring now after the application has happened, but presuming that the 5th year was completed prior to, I guess we could speak to that as well.
Sure. They are added, if you have completed a 5th year of study, those will be added into the GPA calculation with your other years. And this is whether this is a 5th year as part of a degree or a separate year after you have graduated from your 4-year degree. And if you are eligible for the weighting formula, carried a full course load in all 5 years, then you will be able to drop 5 full course equivalents as part of the weighting formula.
Great. One more question here around, the question is, last year there was an email sent out to applicants before verifiers were contacted. Should we be expecting an email like this again this year? So this was actually the first common question we addressed, but I'll let Alicia repeat the answer to that.
Yeah, so soon applicants will be receiving an email just regarding sort of the next immediate steps in the application process. As we mentioned, the two sort of major things that you need to be thinking about are verifier checks, whereby we'll be checking in with your verifiers that you listed on your application. So now might be a good time, if you even want to give them a heads up, just to let them know they may receive a call from us. And then also, if we do have any trouble getting in touch with that verifier, we will contact you directly for assistance. And the other piece that we mentioned was Turnitin. So all of your brief personal essays will be sent to Turnitin to check for plagiarism. But if you are looking to opt out of that process, you can email us at md.applicants@utoronto.ca, and we will honor that request, and it won't affect your application negatively in any way.
Great. Okay, so we'll stay live for a few more minutes in case there's any additional questions that follow up from there. Any other helpful tips or reminders we want to think about for applicants at this time of year?
I can mention that, as I mentioned earlier, when we send an email inviting someone to an interview, they must RSVP by replying to the email. And if they don't, someone from the admissions team will contact them, will call them. If you have put a contact information that is your cell phone, particularly, down on your OMSAS application, please initialize your voicemail. It's happened many times in the past when I've tried to get a hold of someone and there is no voicemail. Now, I just keep calling, but it would help a great deal if you're able to receive messages so that I can get a hold of you more easily.
That's a really good tip. And likewise with email, I'm sure most of you have already done this, but be sure to add our admissions email accounts to your safe list so they don't get filed away in junk, because this does sometimes happen, especially if you're using a university email address. It may be marked as spam when it's coming from a university, so be sure to mark those as safe. The primary email that we're using for applicants is md.applicants@utoronto.ca. So we did get a few more questions that just came in. So the first question is an applicant considered international if they are currently awaiting their permanent residency and are expecting to receive it before the start of the program? So I can address this one. If you're applying and you do not have any legal status in Canada, so you're not a permanent resident yet, then yes, you would be considered an international candidate. However, we do communicate with our international candidates throughout the cycle as well, and we do ask that you update us on any changes to your citizenship or your status here in Canada throughout the process. So if your permanent residency comes through partway through the admission cycle, you are to inform us right away so that we can ensure that you are being reviewed in our general application stream. As you may know, our international seats are supernumerary, which means they are in addition to our funded Canadian seats in the program, of which there are 259. So it is important that you let us know if that status changes throughout the process. So the next question was, do Canadians who did their undergraduate education in the U.S. qualify for the weighted GPA?
The answer is sometimes. The way the courses and the course hours are organized in some universities and some programs in the States can vary quite a bit, and some are very similar. So it's really a case-by-case basis if they can qualify for the weighting formula.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a question around course load. So my question is, if we didn't take a full course load in our first 2 years, but we did in our third and fourth year, how is the GPA calculated?
That would be a CGPA. It would be an average of all the courses that you took as a full-time student that you had completed when you apply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just to clarify, with the weighted GPA, you do have to carry the full course load in all years of your undergraduate studies. So that's why it would, in this case, be a CGPA, because some of the years we're not carrying the full course load.
Now, applicants are always able to fill out the academic explanation essay with any extenuating circumstances that led them to take less than a full course load, and all essays are reviewed.
Mm-hmm. So next question, maybe Alicia could address this one. We did, again, address it a bit earlier in the conversation, but will all applicants be notified if they're, oh, actually, I think this is a little bit different, actually. The question is, will applicants be notified if their application was not reviewed? So I think the answer to that is we do not specifically notify applicants around whether or not their application went through to detailed file review. So if, for instance, you were missing an MCAT score or a reference letter that prevented you from going forward into the detailed file review, we don't actually flag that and let you know that. That is something that, we would, ask you to check your OMSAS application, see what was submitted, and do a little bit of assessment yourself to see why you may not have been successful. But as Alicia mentioned earlier, refusals will be going out as well starting in the new year. So do you just want to talk about the timeline on that?
Mm-hmm. So everyone who receives a refusal will be contacted starting in January, and those will continue on a rolling basis, just as we have rolling file review up until the end of March.
Great. Another question is, do we get a confirmation email after submitting our application?
I believe you get one from OMSAS, but not from us.
Right. So U of T does not send like a separate acknowledgement email following the application deadline, but you can certainly see via your OMSAS account that your application was submitted successfully. The first communication we really will be sending to you is the communication around the verifier checks and the turn it in reminder, which will be going out shortly. Okay, so another question. So there's questions around the weighted GPA and where on OMSAS they can find that information. So I think we can answer this one. We'll answer this one by text because it's a bit more specific, and we'll provide you with the link because we do have a page on our website that specifically talks about GPA calculation and how the weighted GPA works. So we will follow up with you directly on that. Okay, so let me just look. We're getting lots of questions, which is great. We'll stick on for a few more minutes to answer these. Okay, so I'm currently doing 21 out of the full 30 credits for my last year of study. Would this be considered part-time to U of T if I did end up reapplying? So would 21 out of a 30 credit year be considered part-time?
I don't think it would. I think that would be full-time. It's really, you should check with your university. It's really, if they list you as part-time, then that's how we'll take it. But 21 out of 30, no, that sounds like it would still be full-time.
Another question is, if there are changes to our transcripts, is it too late to communicate this information?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so we don't take any updates following the OMSAS deadline.
No, if there was in fact a mistake, particularly one that OMSAS made in uploading your grades or anything like that you notice, certainly contact them and us and any other medical schools about that. But no, we don't use any. We don't take any marks from fall courses, and we don't need an extra transcript if you've convocated or anything like that.
Okay, and I think the last question we'll be able to get to today is again around a full course load and GPA requirement. These are some of our most popular questions for sure all year long. So we're happy to clarify those. So if I have one undergraduate degree with a full course load for all 4 years, and my second undergraduate degree is not a full course load, would I still qualify for the weighted GPA?
Unfortunately not. It has to be all years carrying a full course load. but also, again, with the academic explanations essay, if there are any extenuating circumstances, that's the appropriate place to let us know, and we will review them and sometimes take them before the admissions committee, and again, on a case-by-case basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just a reminder for any GPA questions around weighted GPA, cumulative GPA, how we calculate it, we will post the link to the page I spoke about earlier, but always feel free to send us an email because these questions can be a little bit complex in terms of students having very different situations and again might have extenuating circumstances. So we're always happy to address those by email at medicine.admiss@utoronto.ca. And I think we're going to wrap it up there. Reminder.
Could I just interject? The person that asked about the 21 out of 30,
Mm-hmm.
and they said a full-time student. I just want to make sure they're not talking about a full course load.
Mm-hmm.
If they did mean full course load rather than full-time, no, 21 out of 30 would not be a full course load.
Mm-hmm.
So just want to answer either question you have.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's often a bit of confusion between full-time versus full course load. So we'll clarify that again through the web link that we'll share. But thank you so much for joining us. Again, apologies for our late start. We experienced a number of technical difficulties at the end. Hopefully this was still helpful in answering your questions, and we hope you can join us for the sessions we'll be running in January as well. And for all those who celebrate, happy holidays, and we hope that you have a nice, restful break over the holidays, and we will catch up with you again in January. Thanks.
Thank you.